Well, good morning. How are we doing? Doing good? Happy Labor Day. Do you say Happy Labor Day? I don't know. Do you say that? No. Some people do. There we go. Happy Labor Day. Hope you have a good day of no labor tomorrow. So that'll be good. Hey, I am... this series is a weird series for me because I feel several emotions about this thing. I feel like the content of the series is incredibly important. I think it has the potential to redefine how we see ourselves, how we identify ourselves. I think this series, it has the potential to not just redefine how we see ourselves, but actually, I think, change things on the inside of us, the content of the series. And yet, although it's so incredibly important, I feel like my words and how I'm expressing this are inadequate to express the magnitude of what this is. And I feel a little comforted because the Apostle Paul, who wrote a lot of the New Testament, who met Jesus and tried to define and describe Christianity and the power of what it is and power of what it can literally do in our hearts, he once wrote, he said, this is the mystery that God has revealed. And I'm going, if he's calling it a mystery, how on earth am I supposed to express this in a way that we can understand? But my hope is, as we dive into it and as we express it, that at least the right things will land on where we need it to land. Because if it does, like I said, I think it can literally change our hearts. It has changed me, and I hope that I can express it in a way that at least it makes sense. So let's dive in. The basic idea of the series is this, that wherever we look in our lives, no matter where we look, I can look around here and I see different t-shirts with different identifying marks of what it is that you're wearing, the shoes that we wear. There are identifying marks wherever we look around us called logos. And here are just a few of them. Wherever you look, you see these logos, and these logos identify different things, different services, different clothing lines, different food. Some of them, we look at the logos and we go, I love that company because it represents who the company is, what the company is, how the company operates, because the mark tells me who they are depending on how they do. Some of the things I love, some of the things I hate. I look at it and I go, I never want to go there because I've had a bad experience. But the point is that there are identifying marks wherever we look. Wherever we look, and these marks mean something. And they identify the reality of what's inside that company and how that company integrates with society and how that company serves the world around it. The reason I bring all that up is because the question we're asking in this series is this: what marks you? What is it that marks you? Because what marks you defines you. What marks you makes you live certain ways, makes you relate in certain ways, makes you respond or react in certain ways, makes you get defensive in certain ways, makes you have to prove yourself in certain ways. What marks you defines you. What marks me defines me. And I believe that how we define ourselves determines everything about us. That I think if we look at ourselves and we choose and discover and recognize that my identity says I am whatever, then we will live out of that, whatever it is that we define ourselves as. And the reality is, man, there are so many things in our lives that try to define us. And not only do so many things try to define us, we get our own identity from so many things around us. Last week I put a list up, this is the list I put up, that our family of origin defines us. Sports sometimes define us. Friends, media, these are some of the things that define me, that I got into sports and I did all that. Media tries to define you and tell you that you need to look like this in order to be happy. You need to have this in order to be happy. You need to experience this in order to be happy. Your career has the potential to define you. Successes, failures, our facades, that we want to look a certain way and then we start living that even though we know some things are not lined up with that facade on the inside. We try to do all these things, but all of these things seem to try to define us. And then what happens is, and this has happened with me so much in my life, that the things that have defined me, they leave an indelible mark on who I am. And that leads me to sometimes be really secure in certain things and really insecure in other things. To question myself, can I even do this? Do I have what it takes to do this? Because a mark was left on me due to certain experiences, certain words, certain things that happen in my life. And other things I'm like, I'm awesome. I'm better than everybody else because that mark was left on me. But what I've discovered though, through, life, through counseling, through marriage, that a lot of the marks that were on me that I thought was amazing or that I thought was not that great, a lot of those marks, those definitions, that identity that I had on me, what I've discovered is that most of these things are unreliable. And that as we define ourselves by the things that people say about us, by the things media says about us, by our own successes, because when you succeed, you think one thing about yourself, and when you fail, you think another thing about yourself. What I've discovered is that these are all unreliable, and the way that I know that they're unreliable is because the message keeps changing. What this all tells me that I am says one thing on one day and says another thing on another day. One day I'm awesome, the next day I'm not. One day I can succeed, the next day I can't. One day I'm the most valuable player, and the next day I'm, the guy who lost everything. Because these things, if we identify ourselves based on unreliable sources in our lives, the different marks that it leaves in us eventually leaves us confused, questioning, and maybe even insecure, which is what I discovered in my life. So I think it's really, really, really important to ask ourselves the question, what marks you? What marks me? Who do I see myself as? Because my life literally flows from that. How I relate to my wife, how I relate to my kids, how I lead, how I operate, the things that I think I'm able to accomplish, the things I think I'm unable to accomplish, the things I think I can change in me, the things I don't think I can change in me. All of that flows from how I define myself and what marks me. So I would suggest that it's incredibly important to ask, what marks us? What's the logo that's on your heart? What's the logo that you live out? What's the picture that defines you? And are those definitions reliable? Are they something that you can stand on and go, you know what? I trust this. Because we do, but should we? Now here's what I've discovered. What I've discovered in my life is that as I discovered that many of these things are unreliable, I've discovered that through studying Christianity for many years now, through counseling and working through a bunch of this stuff and seeing, oh my gosh, some of this stuff caused me to do marriage a certain way for the first 5 years of my life that nearly destroyed my marriage in the first 5 years of my marriage and just caused chaos in that because I was defining myself by this, and then through counseling realizing, oh my gosh, is that what I was doing? Is that how I was doing that? That needs to change. And through that, discovering the message of Christianity. And that message has honestly become the most reliable definer of my identity. And it's honestly taken me that's gone up and down in my own security and life and made me go, wait a minute, I can be who I want to be. I can be the husband, the father, the man that I want to be through discovering what Christianity actually says about me. Now, if you're here and you're not a Christian, you may go, I don't buy that Christianity can define us. I don't buy that, and partly maybe the reason you say that is because Christianity has tried to define you and it's been awful. And so if you're here and you're not a Christian and you don't buy the fact that Christianity should or could define you, or that it could be a reliable definer of you, I don't blame you, because Christianity through the centuries has had so many different faces and so many different messages, sometimes judgmental, sometimes condemning, sometimes we're better than you, and if you're not us, then you're worthless. All these different weird, crazy messages has come out of the church, has come out of Christianity, and all of those don't make any sense. So if you doubt or question whether Christianity should define you, please hear me. I don't blame you, because we have messed that up as Christians, as churches, as the history. There's been so many things that we've done so poorly. But here's what I would like to say. Just like many things are communicated inappropriately or said inappropriately, I think there's been many times where the message of Christianity has been lost by the messengers of Christianity. And if we can move past that and get right back down to what Jesus really taught, that's the thing that I think takes into account all of humanity, our entire human experience, and points to different things that finally make sense for me to go, oh, it actually includes that? Wow, that makes sense. And if that's true, then that can impact me and who I am and how I live. So my hope in the series is to try and get through all the mess and get to the place where we go, okay, what does Christianity say about you and about me? And can that define us? And in my experience, as that's defined me, it has really given me more freedom, more peace with me, and more ability to actually reach for and live out who I think I was meant to be. And I believe that's true for all of us. So the question we're asking in the series then is, what does Christianity have to say about our identity? What does it have to say about our identity? Now, I can't go into what I said last week too deeply, but for those of you who weren't here, I just want to catch you up just quickly, because last week we looked at what I would say is step one in understanding Christian identity. And the first thing, and this comes from what Jesus said in one of his first sermons about what Christianity is going to be as he was launching it, he said one of the first things we need to acknowledge as human beings is that we are poor in spirit. Poor in spirit. Now again, I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but let me just say, what on earth does poor in spirit mean? The best way that I could explain it is, to understand what poor in spirit is, just think about what does poor mean. And when I say poor, I mean like really poor, like third world poor, like nothing poor, like I don't have anything poor. And the poverty in that sense is two sort of definitions. One is that I don't have things that other people recognize as value. I don't have things. I am in need. I don't have anything to give. I'm in need, is what poverty means. And secondly, poverty leans into real poverty, says, and I can't change that. I don't have the ability to get out of it. I don't have the ability to say, well, I'll just pick up my bootstraps and let's do this thing. I don't even know if I used that saying right, but hey, I'll just move forward and make this work, and here we go, and it's going to work. No, poor people don't have the ability to do that. So what does poor in spirit mean? Here's how I wrote it down. That we don't, when it comes to being in right relationship with God, when it comes to being a person who can do what is necessary to please God, that we don't bring anything of value that can make us good enough to be in right relationship with a perfect God. That we know we're imperfect. And if God is perfect and I'm imperfect and I should have to and need to live in perfection to be able to be okay with Him, then I don't have what it takes to do that, and I can't change it. I can't discipline myself into being perfect. I can't, be determined enough. I can't do enough to change that thing in me that doesn't live up to a righteous, perfect standard. And that's what poor in spirit means. And Jesus said, if we can just acknowledge that, that's the start of Christianity. And honestly, I really believe this. If we can't acknowledge this, then Christianity will never have any power to change us. Never have any power to actually do what it says it can do in our hearts, because we aren't allowing Him to do it, because we're still going to try and do it, and eventually what will happen is we'll be doing religious things, we'll be doing Christian things, we'll be going to church, we'll be doing all the things we know we should do or think we should do, but it doesn't allow Him to actually do anything inside of us. The Bible word for this, which is a very irritating word, is the word sin. Now, when I say that, everybody's like, no, he's judging and all that stuff. I'm not judging. Not at all, because what I believe that the Bible teaches about sin is that every single human being has a sin problem. And like I said last week, if we take this out of a Christian context and take this out of a church discussion, all of us buy into that. Because the reality is we know we don't live up to our own ideals, let alone God's ideals. We know we don't. And we know there's something in us that pulls us towards things we don't want and keeps us from things we know we should do. We know that. And so we understand there's something in us that's amiss. There's something in us that's not there. So now I want to throw out a big statement that I think defines the first thing we need to identify, the first thing we need to accept when it comes to Christian identity. And this is a harsh statement, and I can't take too much time with this. If you want to hear last week's message, go hear it. But this is the first statement. The step one in Christian identity is we are more sinful than we ever dared believe. That we, all of us, this is all skate, everybody. There's no one that's outside of this. Every single human being, if you're human, this is a part of who we are that Christianity teaches, that we are more sinful than we ever dared believe. And the initial thought for me is, I'm a good person. I really don't push that at me. But once I get over my defensiveness and once I get over my pride, then I think this actually brings some peace and some hope. And here's why. Because if this is true, if that's true for all of us, and Christianity is still true, that means that there's hope for me. That means that we're all on the same playing field. And when I look at other people who are better than me, who seem, like they've got everything together, that I go, wait, do I have to be like them? No. I have to be like this to open the door to Christianity. And that gives me a sense of hope. I'm going to take the next few minutes to explain that a little more. The best way I can do it is to read a quote by one of my favorite authors, Tim Keller, and he describes one of the repercussions of the sin problem in us as humans. He describes, that thing that we know we're more flawed, we know that we have flaws, we know there's something broken in us, we know that. But one of the repercussions of that understanding of who we are leads to this thing that he talks about. And I think this, once again, is a human experience. He describes it so well. It's something that I've experienced. It's something that my wife has experienced. It's something that I've spoken to people. They've experienced. My counselor talks about everybody experiencing this. It's huge. But here's what he says. We, as humans, have a profound, inescapable sense that if we were examined, we'd be rejected. That if someone were to come into your life and go, this is what you do? Are these your thoughts? This is where you've been? Whoa. We have this feeling that if someone were to examine us, that we'd be rejected. And it's just the psychological thing in us. We feel like that. We have a deep sense that we've got to hide our true self. Because if someone finds out who I truly am on the inside, they won't like me. Or at least we need to control what people know about us. And so we kind of portray something out there that we think is good enough. We perform because when I perform and I do this, they like me, so you'll like me. And I know that if I do the right thing in your eyes, that you will like me. He goes on, he says, secretly we feel that we aren't acceptable. The real me, who I really am, we're not acceptable. That we have to prove to ourselves and to other people, and I added to God as well, that we're worthy, lovable, and valuable. That in some way, and I believe this is a human experience, in some way, that if someone were to truly examine the real you, that you wouldn't measure up, that I wouldn't measure up. And so we've got to prove that if I can just make sure that you only know this part of me, and if I can just make sure that I hide this part because I don't think you'll like that part, and you'll feel like I'm awful if you see that part. And so we perform, and we don't show that part, and we hide, and we do all this stuff so that you will love me. Because if you knew that thought that I had last night, if you knew the times when I succumbed to that temptation that I always struggle with, if you knew how I treat people privately, even though I arrive at church on Sundays and then smile and walk in, if you knew what happened in the car on the way to church with my kids because they were punks, and then I treated them like that, and it was just this battle, and then we said, okay, everybody, church face. If you knew that, I don't know if I'd be accepted. If you knew that one thing that I've done in my past that no one knows, I've done such a good job of hiding it. Because I've learned how to perform. I've learned the mask that people like and accept. If you knew that, I don't think I'd be welcome. And there's this thing in us that we know, and I think it's a human experience that we all live by. And then what we realize is that in order to be loved, we need to hide, we need to pretend, we need to perform, and we need to create facades. And if I can create the right ones, then people will like me. But here's the problem. This thinking leads to a really unfortunate but really real result. And that's this. If we truly do that, we never actually feel truly loved. You know why? Because if I'm performing and you like the performance, what is it that you love? Me or my performance? It's the performance. If I'm hiding the worst parts of me, afraid that if you find out the worst parts of me, and I show, the good facade, then inside me, I know that you actually don't love me because you don't know me. You love the face, the mask, the show that I put on. That's what you love. And so in essence, I'm sitting here going, I desperately desire to be loved. I desperately need to be loved. I need that. All of us, that's one of the greatest needs we have as humans, but we're hiding who we are because we don't want you to see that because I think I'll be rejected, and I'm showing this, and so I get the superficial, false kind of love that I think is sort of love, and it satisfies a little bit, but if I'm so scared that if you find out, and so it's not real love. The reality is that we desperately, desperately need and deeply, deeply desire to be truly known. Truly known. Imagine we could be known, even the bad parts, even the awful, even the mess, even the way I've treated people, even the way I've gossiped, even the way I've spoken so poorly, even the things that I've done, even the way I cheated, even the way I did the stuff, even the bad history of what I did. That imagine we could find the peace of being truly known. Everything. Truly known, and yet truly loved. And there is something in us as humans that doesn't know if this is possible. And so we perform. And so we put the mask on, the facade. And so we show the good stuff and hide the bad stuff. But this is what we dream of. This is what we wish. And we don't know if that's possible. But this is the beauty of Christianity. Whew. Christianity, that first step says this: we are more sinful than we ever dared believe. And the beauty of that, is that, the things that you hide, God, as He looks at us, He's going, there's way more that you should be hiding. Way more. You think that's the bad part. No. There's a whole bunch. Well, you are way more sinful than you ever dared believe. So those things we think we can hide and do all this stuff, He's going, no. Way worse. Christianity is brutally honest about our inability to be what God needs us to be okay with Him. Brutally honest about it. And that somehow brings me peace because He knows, He sees every single little bit of it. He sees the worst of me. He sees the mess that I've done in the past and in the present. He sees all of it. And then He says step 2 of identity, and this is so huge, that in the midst of knowing that you are way worse than you ever thought possible, He says this: and you are more loved than you ever dared hope. That He truly knows you more than you know yourself. And He truly sees, yes, are they bad? Oh my gosh, they're bad. They are so bad because they don't live up to the perfection, and I'm being a little facetious, but He sees that we are more sinful than we ever even knew. He sees it all. We're worried about the one little thing that isn't sort of palatable by the people around us, isn't acceptable by the people around us. He's seeing everything. And He's going, but, You are more loved than you ever dared hope. That thing in us that goes, imagine there was a place where I could be truly known and I didn't have to hide and I didn't have to be afraid that one day someone will find out, that one day someone will reject me for the real me on the inside, and so I'm performing and I'm doing the right thing and I have to do this and I know I trip up sometimes and I try to hide it, and God's going, I see it all. I know it all. I see when you do it. I see when the inside of you is going, I want to do it. I see it all. I'm not surprised by that stuff in you. I'm not surprised that you've done it. And guess what? I'm not disappointed because I know you completely more than you know yourself. And guess what? I love you completely. The real you, not the good you, not the pretend you, not the fake you, not the mask you, not the Christian you. I love you. You are valuable to me. I love you. I know you completely. We desperately desire and deeply need to be truly known and truly loved. And that's what Christianity provides. It's amazing. And if we could know that, if we could truly know that viscerally, existentially, experientially, if we could really know that, wouldn't that change everything? The problem is we don't really know that so often. But this is what Christianity teaches. I want to show you Paul the Apostle. I mentioned him earlier. He wrote a letter to Romans, a group of Christians in Romans, and at this time it was sort of late in his understanding of Christianity and his experience of being a Christian, and he was writing the stuff explaining what Christianity is, and he says this so clearly. But let me tell you who Paul was, though. Paul was this guy who was so self-righteous, and you know how we feel about self-righteous people. We don't usually like self-righteous people. He was so self-righteous, he thought he was the best person in Israel. He thought he was God's man, gift to the world, and he was so sure of what he believed that he had justified in his own mind that he was allowed to murder Christians in the name of God. He had justified that. So he could murder people. Okay. What? That's how he lived. And then he met Jesus. And when he met Jesus, this is what he first discovered. Oh my gosh, what am I? Who am I? What have I been doing? Oh my gosh, I am more sinful than I ever dared believe. He writes in one of his letters, he says, I am the worst of all the apostles. I am the greatest sinner. I am the worst of all. That's how he expresses. And he wrote the Bible. But that's what he says. He discovered this. And then in the midst of that, he discovered this. That even though that's true, and even though I was trying to do everything, performing, being what I thought was right, so that God would be pleased with me, I realized that all of it was for nothing. He says, I count it as rubbish. It was worth nothing. I couldn't please him. But what he discovered is that even though that was true of him, that he was more loved, completely loved with all the mess, in all the mess. He was more loved than he ever dared hope. And you know what happened to his heart? It changed. Literally, this man who was a murdering, self-righteous man changed completely. How does that happen? And he went around going, guys, you got to know this. You have to know this. And then later in his life, he wrote this letter where he describes this idea that we are more sinners, more sinful than we ever dared believe, and we're more loved than we ever dared hope. Here's what he said. You see, in his letter he's writing, you see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, poor in spirit, we can't change the mess inside. We can't fix this thing. We can't fix our relationship with God. We were still powerless. Christ died for the ungodly. And I love that he says ungodly because it gives such a clear picture of us versus God. You get God, and then you get ungod. There's godly and there's ungodly. It's the opposite of God. So if God is one thing, we are not that. And he goes, wow, just the right time when we were still powerless and we couldn't fix this thing. We couldn't do it. Christ died for the ungodly. And then he explains something so brilliant. He kind of describes this dying for someone. He says this: very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. You know, if a person's good enough, if a person's really righteous, then maybe you'll take a bullet for them. Like that person, man, we got to protect that person. I'll take a bullet for him because he's righteous. Very rarely, you know, hardly, but, you know, maybe, very rarely will someone die for a righteous person. Though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. And again, this brings up that thing in us that says, I must be good in order to be taken care of. I must be good in order to be loved and accepted and not rejected. So he says, even maybe for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die, but God is different. But God, his ways are different. But God demonstrates his own love. Real, true love, real, unconditional love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And what I love about this is he says, I know who you are. I know who you are. You don't surprise me. I'm not going, oh, did you see what they did? Oh my gosh, I just found this out about them. What? They did it again? God's not doing that. He knows you. Truly, completely, thoroughly, everything you've ever done, everything you think. And we're going, I've got to portray the right thing, I've got a good person, then maybe someone will die for me. No, I've got to be a good person. He's going, no. Ungodly, sinners, powerless, you can't do this. But in that state, while I know everything about you, and listen, I don't know how to express this strong enough, but to know that God knows everything, and he looks at you and he says, and yet you are more loved than you ever dared hope. I know what you did. I know how you treat him. I know how you treat her. I know what's in your heart. You're more loved than you ever dared hope. There's a verse where John, one of the eyewitnesses, quotes Jesus as saying something that just expresses the depth of his love. He says this: greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. We don't have to ever question God's love for us. If someone's willing to die for you, you kind of know their heart toward you. We don't ever have to question that. But in me, there's something that needs to perform to be loved and accepted. No. He knows everything about you. He knows everything. So my question is this: what marks you? What marks you? Because the thing that marks us as humans is, I've got to perform to be accepted and loved. Is it possible that we can come and understand, truly get, truly understand that he knows you completely and he loves you completely? What if that became real to us? Then wouldn't it be true that my identity would no longer have to be marked by all the times that I've had to perform in order to be okay, all the times that I've had to serve properly, be properly, win, succeed in order to be acceptable? Because he looks at you and he goes, listen, I know you, I see it all, and you are loved. I accept you, the real you. Not the pretend one that everybody else sees, the real you. What does that do to us? Does that mark you? Because if it does, I think it changes something in us. Do you feel truly known and truly loved? Do you feel that? Because if you do, that changes us. That makes us different. That makes us able to be at peace and live who we want to live? Does this mark you? Because this is what Christianity is and says. I want to end by talking to two groups of people. The first group of people that I want to talk to is, I've met many people in this boat, and I've been in this boat before, where we live in a way where we feel like, you know what, I'm just not good enough. I don't think God can truly accept me. You don't know what I've done. You don't know how awful I've been. You don't know what I still feel inside. You don't know who I really am. And that marks us. I don't know if God can really love me. I don't know if I buy this, because I don't know if I am worthy of His love. And here's the beauty of Christianity. If step one and step two of what identifies you is true, if step one is true, that we're more sinful than we ever dared believe, then here's the thing. If you feel unworthy, I don't want to be weird or blunt or ugly, but you're right. You're not worthy. Neither am I. Nobody is. That's the beauty of this first step. We aren't. But then because we are more loved than we ever dared hope, somehow God makes you worthy. Not based on your worth, not based on who you are, what you've done, but based on the fact that He died for you. That speaks to your worth. Not because you've done it, but because He's done it. He comes along and He says, it doesn't matter. It's true. You are worse than you think you are. It's true. So is everybody, and I still love you. So if you're sitting here going, I don't know if this can be true for me, it is true for you. Because He knows you. And Jesus died while you were yet sinner. You hadn't done anything to deserve it. He died for you. So that's the first group. I just want you to know He loves you. There's nothing you can do, nothing that can separate you from that love. Nothing. Second thing, second group of people I want to talk to is us as Christians. Because a lot of times what happens to us as Christians is we understand, okay, so while I was a sinner, He died for me, and then I become a Christian, and now I must follow Him and do Christian things because that's what's required of me, so I should do all these things, and I used to be there, so now I'm a Christian, let me do this thing. And somehow we place the requirement of His love after becoming a Christian on my ability to do good again. And then what happens sometimes, I don't know if this has happened to you, I'm pretty sure it has because I know it's happened to me, is that somehow you're like trucking along and you're doing good Christian things. You're like, yeah, I'm the man, this is great, I'm holy, I'm spiritual, I'm good. And then something comes up in you that used to be there. And you're like, wait, what's going on? Why do I want to do that I didn't want to, what is that? And suddenly I go, whoa. And then I'm like, oh, I'm going to fight through the thing. I'm going to do the Christian thing. And then what happens is you trip, you fall, you do it. And then what do we do as Christians? We go, no one can know because I have to perform. I have to be good. Otherwise, I'll be rejected. And the exact lesson that we learned, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us to demonstrate His love for us that wasn't dependent on you, suddenly becomes dependent on me again. What is that? So here's what I want to tell you. If you're a Christian and you've messed up and you're hiding, and by the way, this is why people around us go, Christians are hypocrites. Because we do mess up, and then we put the Christian thing, perform, do the whole thing, and they see through that. But we do it because we think it depends on me. This is what I want to say to you. Do you think God doesn't know what's going on in your heart? Do you think He's surprised? He knows you, and He knows that this is a reality that unfortunately we have to live with until the world ends. That somehow, and I don't know how to explain it, but somehow there's this sinful thing, there's this drive in us that somehow is going to battle us until we die. It's there, and it's going to battle with us until we die. He knows that, and He's not surprised, and He's not disappointed in you. because he knows. And you know what? He knows you more than you know, and you're hiding here. And he loves you more than you ever dared hope. That's Christianity. And my hope is that somehow we can understand that this is a reality, but understand that this is a greater reality. That even though we're more sinful than we ever dared believe, we're more loved than we ever dared hope. And that sets us up for step 3 in Christian identity that we're going to be talking about next week as we start figuring out this. Because Christianity talks about the fact that, so how do we live this thing? How do we be defined by him and not by sin? That's possible, and we'll talk about that. But before we get there, I don't want to leave today without giving us all an opportunity to sit in this. Because I think as Christians we go, yeah, God loves me. And then we perform. Yeah, God loves me. And then we hide. Yeah, God loves me. And then we depend on ourselves. What if we believed this and believed this? I believe it will change our hearts and redefine us and have the power to actually do something valuable in us and not just make you do Christian things. So what we're going to do is we're going to end with a song. And I'd love for you, as Michael and Dee Dee come up and sing this song, what I'd love for you to do is I'd love for you to just think, where am I hiding from him? Where am I still performing? Where do I not own deeply, viscerally, experientially? Where don't I own that even though I know I have these flaws and things, that I am so deeply loved and valued that while I still struggle, he loves me. He knows me fully and he loves me fully. He knows me completely and that I don't have to hide and I can find peace in him. Can we do that? Let me pray for us, and they're going to come up. Father, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much that your love was demonstrated in the greatest act in human history, where a perfect man died on behalf of others. We never have to question whether we're loved. God, I pray that somehow you will take this idea that we are loved more than we ever dared hope, even though we're more sinful than we ever dared believe, that we are loved. You will take that message and drill it into our hearts, that it will mark us. It will define us. So we'll never forget that that reality is there. And that no matter what we've done, what we still do, how we mess up tomorrow, your love is secure. I pray that we know that. And we come out from behind the facade to accept that and the life-changing reality of it. In Jesus' name, amen.